Hello and welcome to your practice. Today we're going to begin with a really frequently seen little flow of two different postures, cat-cow. And not only will I show you the traditional all fours positioning for cat-cow, but all different fun variations from various different foundational postures. So we'll begin our practice today in an easy, comfortable seated position. You can feel free to add a blanket underneath your hips or blocks underneath your outer thighs if you want a little bit of extra support. And we'll just let our hands rest on our knees and create some lengthened spine by sitting up tall. Feel free to close your eyes or soften your gaze and just take a few steady breaths here to begin. When you feel ready to start to add some movement, begin by just feeling your pelvis tip forward and backward. Imagining that your pelvis is a bucket and you're trying to spill it to the front and then back behind you. You don't even need to worry about what the rest of your spine is doing yet. Just really focus on mobilizing right through that pelvic bowl. Then, as you start to feel comfortable with that, it will be natural to just start to transition into a little bit more spinal movement. As you tip your pelvis forward, begin to feel a lifting around the area of the chest. Your shoulders will roll back and down, and you might even lift your chin and your gaze a little bit. As you spill your pelvis backward, the spine will naturally round, and then you can round it a little bit more on purpose so that you feel a stretch across your upper back, even through your shoulders. You might find an inhalation to be supportive during that extension phase, and an exhalation to help you engage and support the spinal flexion, the rounding. So we can inhale as we come forward and exhale as we tilt back and round. And just keep going at your own breath's pace with these seated cat-cows. Just taking one more of each. And then we'll come back to a neutral spine. Your pelvis is sitting upright, not tilting forward or back, and the natural curves of the spine are present as we sit up tall. And we'll take that length in the spine and that neutral orientation of the pelvis right along with us as we transfer our position to all fours. Now, this is where you'll most often see cat-cow in a usual practice or a class setting. Begin by setting your foundation, making sure you feel comfortable on your hands. I like to point my index fingers towards the front of the mat, but some people feel more comfortable with the middle fingers pointing forward. Just explore a little bit and see what works for you. Whenever we're on our hands, it can be helpful to imagine that you're trying to stamp each fingerprint into the mat and also the heels of your hand. Let there be a little tiny pocket of air right at the palm, like you're trying not to squish a blueberry under there. And that'll give you a really nice suction on the ground and a comfortable position over time for your wrists. As far as our knees and shins, they will be positioned about hip width distance apart. So right down from those bony protrusions at the front of your pelvis, that's the line that you want to draw from, more so than the actual width of your hips. So here we are in our tabletop position. And just notice your natural tendencies, your natural orientation. Some of us tend to tilt the pelvis forward naturally, and that results in this little lumbar curve, this sway here, beyond even what's naturally present for most people. Other individuals have what's called a thoracic kyphosis, or a rounding of the upper back that happens even when they're trying to remain neutral. In fact, most of us have a little bit of that just from the normal shape of the human body, and then also from repeated positioning when we're over our computers, over our steering wheels in that kind of rounded position. So just notice what's going on in your body and see if you can just come to a long spine. And then just like we did in seated, start with those pelvic tilts. Can you tilt your pelvis forward and then backward? Anterior pelvic tilt, posterior pelvic tilt. You're spilling the bowl forward, spilling it backward. Just doing these pelvic tilts is wonderful TLC, and it's strengthening for the core, therapeutic for the low spine. When you're ready, start to integrate bigger spinal movements, rounding the back into cat, and then lifting the chest and the tailbone up into cow. And keep moving at your own natural rhythm, just flowing pretty seamlessly between those two postures. Noticing where you feel stuck and restricted in your movement, and noticing where you feel free and easy movement. A lot of people tend to really overuse their neck. So they come up into cow like this, and then they feel like they'll get a little more out of it if they really look up. But what you'll find is that that adds compression to the cervical spine, to your neck. So just let the arch of your back bend be really moderate. Let it continue along your whole spine without overdoing it at the neck or the lower back. And we'll do one more of each, one more time, going through. And then we'll come back to a tabletop position and just notice how that feels after a little round of that. For this next round, we'll add a little triceps push-up or an elbow bend between each cat and each cow. I really like this option. It feels like it just allows even more freedom of movement. So we'll start up in cow, taking that back bend or that chest lift, and then bend the elbows and then press into your round spine. Cat stretch. Bend your elbows again and lift. And bend your elbows and pull up into that round position. And you'll find that a lot of the strength is probably coming from your core, not just your arms. That allows you to stay a little lighter on your hands than you might think. We'll do a couple more of these. One more time rounding. And then we'll come back just to that neutral spine position. Take a breath. Always just checking in, noticing how you feel. And then we'll go down to the forearms for some lumbar cat-cows. These will really help us to zero in on the pelvic movements because we get really grounded and stable here through the forearms and sort of freeze the upper body a little. So begin by just imagining that you're tucking your tail. And then you'll come back through neutral, spill the pelvis forward. The pelvis tilts back. And then the pelvis tilts forward. Your upper body will move a little bit, but not nearly as much as when we were in the straight arm position or when we were bending our elbows. So just a nice chance to keep working on core strength, pelvic tilts, and to isolate the lower back. And let's just come up one more time. Come back to neutral. And then come all the way back to a tabletop position. And really make sure that your hands are set up supportively and comfortably, because we're going to now do an option that will take us back to downward facing dog. So this is another one that I like to sometimes work into a flow, and that is to come up into cow. So you're going to lift the chest, lift the tailbone, let the whole back gently extend. And then right here where we would normally round the back into cat, we are going to tuck the toes, round the back, but then continue on up into a downward facing dog. Then we'll come down, set the knees down, and lift the chest right back up to where we started, cow posture. And again, we're initiating the movement, rounding the back, and then using that core strength that automatically kicks in to pull back into downward facing dog. Lower down, lift up, and we'll do 2 more rounds. Pulling back to downward facing dog, lifting up into cow, and one more time we'll pull back to downward facing dog. Just take a pause here. If your back was rounded because you were in that sort of cat position coming in, just let it come back to a neutral position. And maybe it would even feel good to pedal out your feet a little bit, stretching through the backs of the legs. And then we're going to come back to stillness and give a little lift of the right foot and step forward to warrior one. So step to the space between your hands, help your foot along if it didn't get there. Turn the back foot out slightly and anchor down. There should be space from right to left between your feet rather than aligning like you're on a tightrope. So make sure you've got some space about hip width distance apart with the feet. You can bring your hands right up onto your thigh and come up all the way up to your warrior one position. And just take a breath here. I'm going to show you 2 variations of cat-cow that you can do from your warrior position, and then that will wrap up our practice for today. The first one, we'll bring the hands right down onto the thigh. So you're kind of in like a little humble warrior position. And then we'll just move right from here into a little gentle back bend. And then round the back. Extend the spine. And round the back. We're getting all this strength and endurance built in the front leg as we do this, as well as great spinal mobility. We'll do one more round through. And then we'll come to a neutral spine, and then just hinge up to your standing traditional warrior one. This next variation will integrate the shoulders a little bit more and really help us to work on protraction and retraction of the scapula. So interlace your hands and then start to round into your cat posture while really stretching the skin across your upper back. This is protraction, and it's a really important skill to be able to do in poses like plank posture. Then we're going to open up and come into that heart lift, spinal extension back bend. So once again, we'll round the back. Just imagine you're hugging a big old tree. Let the shoulders separate. And then open up. Your shoulder blades will draw together towards each other like you're squeezing the juice out of an orange right between your scapula. And we'll do it one more time through. Rounding. And then extending. And then we'll come back to warrior one. Now, if you've already had enough time on your wrists today, just go ahead and step forward and switch legs and wait there in warrior one. If you want to go through downward facing dog, you can reach up, hinge forward, and step back. Take a moment in downward facing dog. And then just like we did on the other side, we'll give the left leg a little lift and step it forward to the front of the mat. Position your back foot. We always want to build from the ground up. So rather than sort of coming up all wobbly and out of alignment, build your foundation strong, placed intentionally first. We're spreading our toes. The back foot is pointed about to the front corner of your mat. And then bring your hands up onto your thigh and hinge on up. Take a moment just to check in. Make sure you're feeling that strong foundation of warrior one, which has a bent front knee and a straight back leg. And then we'll do those two variations on this side. Starting with the hands on the thigh. You can interlace them or you can stack them or kind of hold the thigh. It doesn't really matter, whatever feels good. Come up into your back bend. And then round your back. And just see if you can get some movement going. Learning to mobilize the spine from different foundation positions. Make sure you keep breathing. And then we'll do one more. When you're finished with the round that you're on, just come back to your neutral spine. And pelvis is tilted forward. And then bring it back to neutral pelvis. Now we're up in our traditional warrior one. We can interlace our hands and round the back from here. And then open up. Just a little lift of the gaze. Again, we're not throwing the head back here. Round the back. Extend. Exhale. And inhale. When you feel like you've had enough, come back to your warrior one position. And then take a step forward to Tadasana, mountain posture. And that completes our breakdown of cat-cow and all of those different fun variations. And you're in a great place, warmed up to continue your practice. Or if you feel like that's been enough for today, then thank your body for the work that it's done. And I thank you for practicing with me. Namaste.